Hello and good day, everybody. I assume you're here because you have just watched my previous video and you know that I am well underway on my 2023 challenge. But if for some reason you haven't watched that and you need some context, I am challenging myself to play through 120 games, essentially 10 games a month, because my library is full up to the brim of games that I haven't touched yet, and I thought it would be a fun challenge for this year. So far, we are well underway, feeling pretty good because we're, as of right now, at about 31 games. I'm almost done one at this very moment. However, I'm only going to be showing off about 29 games. I'm only going to be doing about anywhere from like a 30-second to a 2-minute review in this video of the games I've played so far. Fair warning, some of these are going to be pretty quick because not all of the games need a paragraph on them. Some of the games will deserve a bit more of a deep dive, and you'll be able to tell during the course of this video which ones those might be. Besides that, this is just a reminder that I'm streaming currently on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays all the time, and sometimes I'm sneaking in streams on other days. Obviously, you can find me on Twitch if you want to drop by and see how the journey is going. And without further ado, let's get into the review. First game I played this year was YUC'e. It's a small Metroidvania, it's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it for beginners. Only 5 to 8 hours long, depending on if you're a completionist or not, and the fact that there's no real combat in the game, it just focuses on platforming and dodging attacks. Next was the Rusty Lake series. Now I played through this one at all sorts of different times, and of course it was the wonderful Mary who put me onto the series and played alongside me through all of them. Now other people might argue with me. However, I believe that this series is best defined as a psychological / horror puzzle series. I think this series in general does a great job at just trying to walk you through this very interesting and winding story. There are such odd elements to it, but I think that it does it in a way that is just extremely entertaining. The puzzles are great. They're very odd at times, and they make you think outside the box while feeding you lore all along the way. What's great is that there's also an evolution as you explore the series and go through the games. The type of art that's used, the type of puzzles, the methods of solving them, they all play on a theme typically. Obviously, they need to be a bit consistent. However, each game does something a little bit different, and that's why I think everybody who loves puzzle games should make the Rusty Lake series a staple in their library. I never grew up with an N64, so this was my first time ever playing Mario 64. At the beginning, I was having a really tough time, but by the end of it, I just fell in love with this game. I will probably have a follow-up video because of all the fantastic moments that happened during the playthrough with Alex, so you can probably expect that at some point in the year. Islets was the second Metroidvania that I played, and it's also by the same developers who made YUC'e. However, this game is a huge glow-up from their last project, and I highly recommend this to people who are new to Metroidvanias. It's fairly easy, it's cute, the characters are amazing, and it's a very colorful and wonderful world. Hypno was a free game that I had in my library, and it essentially boils down to a platformer that requires you to survive as long as possible. It was pretty fun and offered a couple hours of gameplay that were very relaxing. TikTok Isle is another short and sweet game that is on this list. It is a puzzle game that requires you to traverse different timelines in order to fix a clock tower so you yourself can get back to your own timeline. Pretty fun, and the highlight for me was the mini games. People might not know this about me, but I love a good strategy game, and Into the Breach scratches that itch without being too cumbersome to play. I believe Into the Breach, given maybe an hour or two, you'll become familiar with the mechanics of the game, and it is a blast, offering a ton of different ways to play it because there's so many different squads, and just honestly endless fun. I could pour 100 hours into this game easily and not be disappointed. I'm not gonna lie, I still don't know how I feel about Stillness of the Wind. It was a very therapeutic game, but with a story that will leave you with more questions than answers, all I can really say without spoiling anything is do not be fooled by the colorful and pleasant aesthetics. It's one of those games that you just feel through, and if you're looking for a relaxed experience with a bit of a walking simulator vibes, I definitely recommend this game. Virginia is a bit of a doozy. It is essentially just a walking simulator. I'm not even sure what the story was really about, but the art direction itself and the music was phenomenal. I just can't really recommend it for its story. It was a hodgepodge of like jump cuts at times, and you know, it ended with things that just confused me, if I'm being honest. For Valentine's Day, I thought, what better series to play than the Monster Prom series? I had already played the first one quite some time ago, but I decided to play through the second and third games. However, I want to highlight the third game, which is the Monster Road Trip. I think I really like the road trip aspect more because the basic gameplay mechanics are mostly the same, just how they affect the general story is way cooler in my opinion. In this way, they shook it up. It's not so much about dating someone or flirting with people. It's more about just trying to survive the road trip and getting into wacky and sort of zany scenarios, which I just think is way more charming than just the basic gameplay of sort of raunchy humor and just flirting with all the characters. This one just kind of charmed me a bit more than the others. And in general, I just think as a concept, it's a lot more fun as the choose your own adventure sort of style of game. So for me, I would personally recommend the third one over the other two, which might be blasphemy for fans of the series. But honestly, I just had a lot more fun with the characters and the shenanigans that happened in the third game. I can say this right now that What Remains of Edith Finch is a game deserving of a full-length video. This game was such a pleasure to play. Of course, the reviews on Steam were indicative of that from the very start. This is a game that has received praise from pretty much anyone who has ever played it. I don't know if there was any real negative reviews, but for right now, the major point I want to hit home is the fact that What Remains of Edith Finch has masterful storytelling. For that alone, I need to recommend it because it weaves an emotional and interesting story that'll have you asking questions and poking around the wonderfully eclectic Finch property to try to get your answers. The game drip feeds you an overarching story of the Finch family that is just so unique, and I have never really seen something like this before, so it definitely stole my heart, and at the end of it all, I was kind of wanting more. And I think everybody can connect to that feeling because those types of games are few and far between. This is 100% a game I would recommend anyone play, just for the experience. I received Beer Blade for free from a Twitter contest, but I can say wholeheartedly that this game was an absolute pleasure to play. There aren't a lot of platformers that are shaking up the space, but this one was very charming and did its own thing very well. I have to say though, there is one particular level that almost drove me insane, and anybody who was around the streams will know that the balloon forest level was kind of BS. Other than that, I loved playing this game. It was a very fun time. Kunai is a Metroidvania that I've been eyeing in my library for quite some time, but I think before even approaching it, I knew I might have a lukewarm reception to it. Kunai does some things really well. First off, its aesthetic is phenomenal and very unique. It also has a very unique weapon system that I thought was really interesting. However, a few points off, and this might just be my fault, but the native controller support really dampened my experience, and I didn't find the plot or story overall interesting, and it wasn't even really that in depth. However, that should not distract from the fact that this game is just quite beautiful, and what it does as a Metroidvania, it does pretty well. Unfortunately, there also wasn't a lot of substance in backtracking and what makes a Metroidvania really special in my opinion, but still, I think this is another good starter Metroidvania if someone wanted to get into that genre. I've been meaning to play through the Momonocle series for quite some time now. Ever since that I played through Reverie Under the Moonlight in 2016, I always wanted to explore the other games which I knew came before it. Momonocle 1 and 2 were games that were never released on Steam, and the third one was, so I actually had to go and pay a small sum, $4, to play through the first and second ones, which were very short experiences. The first one was insanely tough near the end and really kicked my ass. However, I really loved the second one, and the third one was just as good. I think the second and third games would be great as introductions into the Metroidvania franchise, and honestly, I've always really enjoyed the aesthetics of the series and the character design. Momonocle Reverie Under the Moonlight won't be shown here, however, it is one of my favorite Metroidvanias I've ever played. These games were really cool because you got a little bit of the background on the story and some of the characters that you saw in that game, as it's the fourth installment. I never really had any background on characters or what was the origin in some of the lore that is explained in Reverie Under the Moonlight. I think the fact that the creators made such a unique world is what really draws me in and what made going back through the older games really enjoyable. Another game that I played, which kind of happens in tandem in the timeline of Reverie Under the Moonlight, was Minoria. This was a bit of a different approach to the series. I have to say I really loved the divergence they took from the Momodora series in Minoria. The art style, the gameplay, the overall mechanics, although it's still a Metroidvania at its core, they have definitely revamped the overall experience that you have with combat, with leveling up. It's just different. It has the same DNA, but I think they did something really cool here. The only thing I will say that is kind of negative is that at the beginning I did struggle with like the clunkiness of the character. Usually Metroidvanias control really tight and very quick, but this one felt a little bit slow at the beginning. It gets faster later, but I just struggled with that at the beginning. Other than that, this game is absolutely fantastic. It is a great addition to the Momodora series, and there is another game coming out very soon, and I'm very excited for it. I know I'm a bit biased, but I think as tie-ins to Reverie Under the Moonlight, I really enjoy these games. The second and third were great staples. I recommend the third especially if you're new to Metroidvanias, as it's available on Steam and you don't have to look on a website to get it. And Minoria for more seasoned players for sure. I think it is one of those games that you should definitely check out. As far as puzzle games go with an absolute beautiful story, I cannot recommend When the Past Was Around enough. I can't say too much about this game without spoiling the emotional and beautiful story that it tells. Beyond the absolutely gorgeous aesthetics, it is a very nice and relaxing puzzle game that will have you experiencing probably about 3 hours of gameplay. Although these games are kind of one and done because you can't experience the story for the first time again, this game is so relaxing that I think if you came back to it, you would just enjoy your experience all over again because the music and the aesthetics are just that pleasant. I usually really love puzzle games with unique aesthetics and gameplay aspects, but at times Gorogoa was pretty confusing, and not all puzzle games are created equal. Some are more intuitive than others. What this game really excels in is its storytelling through the art that it's showcasing, which I think is really strong, but at times the puzzles were even farther than outside the box. Still though, I think Gorogoa is a game worth playing. You just might find yourself needing to take breaks, only because I think a handful of the puzzles are removed a bit far from typical logic, so it can be a bit confusing at times. Behind the Frame is another one of those puzzle games that is just simply beautiful. From the animation style to the story that it tells, everything that this game has will probably wow and amaze you. I can't say too much about it without spoiling anything, but it showcases a story about the intersection of two painters' lives over the course of many years, and it is just beautifully told, beautifully presented, and even at a few points it was a little bit dark and spooky. All I can say for sure is that I think at the very least people will be absolutely stunned by the quality of the animation and art style. The aesthetic of this game looks like it's straight out of a Ghibli film. It is just insane. Can't recommend it enough. Just like other puzzle games, it is probably like around 3 to 5 hours worth of gameplay, but every moment is pretty magical. If you're familiar with the Resident Evil franchise, you'll know exactly what this puzzle game is all about. Much like the inventory organization skills you need for Resident Evil 4, this game capitalizes on the enjoyment of just simply sitting in your inventory and organizing all the bits and bobs you might have laying around. This game is somewhat challenging. It'll give you about 2 hours worth of amazing puzzles, and honestly, when Resident Evil 4, the remake, was just around the corner, it was kind of just a fun little puzzle game to tie into replaying the original Resident Evil 4 as well as the remake, which was a great and charming way just to pass the time and enjoy some very deep and thoughtful organization puzzles. Highly recommend this game to anybody. Honestly, it's just a good time. Coincidentally, the next game I played was Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, this game deserves a huge deep dive as well. Honestly, it is one of the best remakes I have played to date. There's not enough good things I could say about this game. Being a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise, but also a huge fan of Resident Evil 4 on its own, playing this game alongside Hail the Stash, aka Alex, was just a freaking blast. They did so many things right, very few things wrong, if any, and honestly, I think that I'm going to spend a lot more time playing this game. It was an absolutely crazy roller coaster ride when I played it on stream. There was just so many fun and amazing moments. It was just a blast to play, and I'm so happy that they did it justice and took out the things that didn't need to be there and just built upon the things that made the game great. I think they really knocked it out of the park. Good job to Capcom. The last game on our list is Ender Lilies. This is probably one of my new favorite Metroidvanias. It's definitely up there, like right behind the likes of Hollow Knight and Super Metroid for me. Ender Lilies stands alone as a Metroidvania. Honestly, it does things in such a unique way, has such a unique art style that I can't recommend this one enough. It's one of those games that comes around every once in a blue moon and really revitalizes what it means to be a Metroidvania game. In the genre that has so many titles that you could be playing, this game just stands alone in so many ways. I have to highlight probably the main thing that makes this game so phenomenal, which is the soundtrack that is just so perfect. I wish I could have a vinyl of it, honestly. From the leveling up feature to the different spirits you get, and the very interesting world and lore that it drops along your adventure. There's so many reasons to backtrack and visit areas. There's so many interesting areas. There's interesting enemies. The enemies are even more interesting because of the different art styles. The bosses are challenging, but not too difficult where you'll be getting frustrated. I think they're just enough challenge to make you work for it. And what's nice is that all of the different combinations you can have for combat really make it your own experience, that you will not have the same one as anybody else. You can customize, you can enjoy the adventure at a slow pace, at a fast pace. I spent myself about 18 hours playing the game, and all of the time was well spent. I definitely will be revisiting this game because it's just one of those Metroidvanias that is now in the top of my list. Well, that's it, folks. Those are all of the games I've played to date, except for a few that have already been finished as of the release of this video. Hopefully, you enjoyed the reviews, and maybe there are a few games that you'll be picking up yourself. So far, I feel like I've just been having a great experience with all of these. I don't think there are many that really put a bad taste in my mouth. All of the games that I've bought apparently were good ones. Honestly, the fact that I have gotten through so many games already is so relieving in a way, because I feel like I haven't played this many games in a really long time, and I don't know, I think some people should try this challenge out themselves, because you get to experience games like you did, at least personally I find, like you did when you were younger, when you could just play video games all the time, and as long as you're pushing to get through them, it feels like you're going on a bunch of new adventures. As you can see, most of these games were indie games, and I have been playing puzzle games every Sunday as well, so if you're wondering why there's so many puzzle games on this list, that is why. And I'm always joined by Mary, of course, since I sometimes get stumped and I need a trusty friend to get me out of my brain slumps, because not every time am I going to be as sharp as I always am when I am playing video games early on a Sunday. At this rate, I think I am going to be able to finish this challenge. I know it's a bit early on, I'm only about a quarter way through, but I have a really good feeling about this. The real test will be when I am getting into summer and my job takes up more of my time. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I can still keep up with it. But on that note, everyone, I appreciate you joining me today, and as always, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.